Hello, listeners. Welcome once again to the HIA TV. Today, we're privileged to have a lot of presenters to give us the latest information on COVID and also drug approval process. Last week was a very interesting conversation as well, and we hope that you enjoy this. Please share the feed, like it, share it. Also, go on our YouTube channel and make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of content for you today. We had the privilege of bringing on a lot of people that have interesting stuff to tell us about our current status of COVID, especially in Ghana and also in the United States and around the world. We will share very, very good information today. So again, don't touch the dial. Make sure that you like our page, Health Info Africa, and also share the feed so that other people will benefit from the broadcast that we are having today. So without much ado, we're going to take a little commercial break and we will come back to give you all the great information that we promised, and also make sure that you keep your comments coming, your questions coming, put them in the Facebook comment section, and we'll be playing.
And yes, we've seen a significant rise. We're doing
fellow Ghanaians, and the measures put in by government in response to the novel coronavirus disease, which has so far affected some 118,000 people across the world. WHO has now characterized it as a pandemic.
Coronavirus, COVID-19, why the fever never bow, abre, do Aboshe, anti-sense, anti-taste, yo, and do me dizzy. I warn in danger code, and do me yaumo, feel dizzy. Papa, baby, what say, baby? Esha wekum nipa, Europe wekum, human African, Sudan, grass and baba. She, soldier Suro Corona, lawyer Osuro Corona. Malam Suro Corona, while I was past Suro Corona. Mayu, Mayati, Tobia Suro Corona. Mayu, Mayati, Lena Suro Corona. Usu Suro Corona, so no smarts is a look of Roma. Mama, who refuse to meet the social distance and weaponano. All one surface seminar, and sanitizer the baby fair, man can't quick. Initiya not lefi sister didn't change ma yenchi mopone sheshia yenchi pone chechia sijai kasa tinti na 28 ya kofie na mayewu na ya tinto bia sulo corona meyewo na ya tinye ina yesulo corona motisa kwanya zona kado fele kachi muke coronavirus wake motiwo nose mask ni Omonele ma fangwani kode fele Premesia, moti ya wafe For social distance di jiva wake Lemble tu corona mele meula Na mwapele mwache Isi mwama nwake mwake Shiwa bansho na kawa ilo Wile ya peni ya kelu akale wile konko Ati dede no smas Wash and show na bole ma distance Money tension wake cha corona Koko onye mwenye de ubabo Everybody low, I don't know, I know, Corona. Nara o, Kukugela. Gataza sanitizer, Tojidela, Apapela. No social distance, we are better than do. Mayu, Mayati, Tobia, Suro Corona. Mayu, Mayati, Lena, Suro Corona. As I'm a Catholic Franklin Sido, one top portion of Franco Sudo. Man for vessel and smuggling Nippon Magana, my banaka woman and shame dido. Hey, yes, you say that she DBA. You fruity exercise, Nepun Sudo on Sa Corona. You know Muzuni PD, you rest PD, you get my bell for Philly. Yenda, and you be a main pay, Sedimwa, Nafra Namas and I want them my fortune, men Sulo name when the Tamado in Yumukra. Namaye. Mayati Tobia Suro Corona. Mayewo Mayati Lena Soja Suro Corona. Lawyer Osuro Corona. Malam Suro Corona.
Once again, welcome back from that commercial break. I'm going to bring on Dr. Afosa, to join me today so that we can, co-host this very important section for you. So, Dr. Afosa, how are you doing? Hello, Dr. Afosa. Yes, there we go.
Yes, I'm well. How are you doing, Edward?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Yeah, we're hanging in here, hoping for vaccines to be rolled out so we can all get our shots and then get back to some level of normalcy.
Correct.
As we're all aware, we're not in normal times.
That's true.
It's crazy what's going on, but hopefully, science is paving the way. We're making strides. So
that's great. That's great.
Keep on being careful and being hopeful.
Yeah. Do you want to tell our listeners about the lineup that we have today?
So today it's a really awesome lineup we have. We have really resourceful persons to take us through the discussions that we have. We're going to begin by talking about school reopenings, and then we'll talk about the latest surge in COVID-19 cases. Is it really a latest surge, or is it something that has been brewing in the pot and now we are seeing the consequences of all our actions or misactions? We'll get to know. We have Nana Kofi Kwache with us today to give us the numbers. We have Nico also in here to talk about the media narrative. What have the media houses done? What are they doing now? Are there any changes? We also have Thelma Alaubila with us today. She's one of the authors who co-authored the first publication in Ghana that was highlighting, the risk of using hydroxychloroquine and other, medications that were initially being purported to be treatments for coronavirus. So we want to take her thoughts on this as well. And then we may have a guest appearance by Kwame Sapong-Asiedu, who is also going to come in and then tell us about his opinion on what's going on currently in the country. So it's a wonderful lineup, and do well to stay with us for the whole period. And I'm sure you'll leave very informed.
All right. Thank you very much for that. So we're going to take a short break, and then when we get back, we're going to bring the first segment to you, which is pretty much going to focus on what is really going on in Ghana, especially when it comes to media and how information is being shared about COVID-19 and actually how serious it is back home in Ghana. So don't touch that. I'll be right back. All right, so Kwame, now we have to bring in our guest. I think we're going to begin with Nee. So Nee, if you're there we go. Nee is right here. How are you doing, Nee?
Not too bad. I'm hoping for better days.
Awesome. And then let's bring in Nana Kofi too. Hey, Nana Kofi, how are you doing?
Hi guys, very fine, thank you. Thanks for having me as usual.
Awesome. All right, so Kwame, you can take it away from here.
Yeah, so we also have at this point, I'd want to bring in Kwame Sapong-Asiedu, who's with us. So yes, that's Kwame Sapong-Asiedu. And greetings.
Yeah, hello, greetings everybody. How are you?
Yeah, we're all doing well. And then we have Thelma also with us to help us with this discussion as well.
Hi.
So as we informed our viewers, it's a packed house today, and then we're going to bring you a lot of information. We want to begin initially by talking about the vaccines. Where are we now? This is something that we've made it a point to talk about every time we begin our show, to let our viewers know what is going on the vaccine front. I know a lot of us are aware of the conspiracy theories that have been spread, have been pushed out, and we feel it's part of our responsibility to assure our viewers that, look, do not pay attention to all those conspiracy theories, the misinformation, disinformation. The vaccines are not out there to harm anyone. It is for our own good. So at this point, again, I would like to put up the numbers when it comes to the vaccines. Where are we in terms of development? And the good news that we have is that as time has gone by, gotten approval. So currently we have 10 that have or are in the later, in early use or limited use, and then full approval for use. And this is good news. When the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine came up, and then the Moderna vaccine also came up, we were faced with challenges in that we're thinking it would be difficult for us to use them in our region because of their, the need for storage in such extreme conditions. But with time, we have the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine also coming out, and then there are a few coming up. And so we have, likelihood of getting vaccines for use in our region. So that's great news. And then also, the number of countries that are being able to use the vaccines now, it's increasing. At some point in this conversation, we'll talk about where Ghana is in terms of obtaining some of these vaccines for use. Edward, do you want to add anything to this part of the conversation?
Yes, absolutely. And again, we're looking at a very interesting change in science and discovery, and you see all these numbers of vaccines. And it's because a lot of money has been pushed into it, a lot of resources have been pushed into making these vaccines, and also none of the steps were skipped. Actually, there was vigorous vetting of the data and things like that. Even though there's been a lot of hiccups here and there, most of these vaccines went through the same approval process as any other vaccine in the past. The only difference is that it's a change and enhancement in technology. That's where we're having all this turnaround time, and we're having all these great numbers. So definitely it's something that we should all be happy about, that we get a lot of people inoculated so that we can have the herd immunity that we all seek so that we can go back to normalcy. So that's what I have to add to this.
All right, thanks, Edward. At this point, I would like to bring in our panelists one by one to share their views on the vaccine development, if they have anything to talk about. I would like to bring in Ni first to give us some thoughts.
Some of the media insights around the conversation around vaccines. This week, I haven't seen a lot of conversation surrounding vaccines in Ghana, and really it's troubling because we need to do a lot of public education, as I'm sure Nana Kofi Kwachi and Kwame Sapon Asedi will also speak to. So that's all I have to add on this subject.
Okay, so I'll bring in Kwame Sapon Asedi to share his thoughts first.
Thank you. The issue around vaccines is interesting. You see, in one breath, as Africans, when all the research started, we didn't want to contribute because we felt we didn't want to be guinea pigs. Now the vaccines are here, and some are saying they are demonic. Others are saying we need to get our scientists to look into the veracity and efficacy of these vaccines and do a benefit-risk analysis. I am saying we are the reason why we are at this place. And I'm also saying that at the end of the day, what is important is for us to be able to get some form of herd immunity. The way this pathogen is behaving, and with everyone now the data coming out, there's been a paper in Nature, there's been a research by Public Health England which points to 5 to 8 months immunity based on wild exposure. Yeah. It is clear that this is going to be a vaccine that would be administered on a yearly or bi-yearly basis. And therefore, having all these funny conversations about our involvement, our not being involved, is not helpful. But more importantly, we as a continent would benefit from using our energies to fight all the negative information and all the anti-vax information that is going out there, because that's what's going to hit our society.
All right, thank you very much. Nana Kofi, we invite your comments at this point.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, guys. So yeah, I think what Kwame has said, what Nia said are both spot on. I think we're in a situation right now where we have two competing challenges. One with information and communication around the vaccine, and one about procurement of the actual vaccine. The information communication stuff, I'm sure we'll get to that later in this discussion, but it really does come down to the fact that there are legitimate historical reasons why Black people, Africans might have hesitancy about taking the vaccine. But it's important, as we've already said here, that we make it clear that this is something that went through a transparent process, something that went through a rigorous process, and to communicate to communicate candidly about the fact that yes, some people when they take the second shot they might have a slight fever. We've seen slight things like that, but those are expected with any vaccine. We need to do that communication work. We need to get that started soon. To be honest, when you look at the kind of online polling, listen to the media conversation about the vaccine, we are obviously going to have a very big problem here when it comes to acceptability of the vaccine, because there are even people in the medical community, pretty senior, who are advocating that we don't need the vaccine because our situation here is not that bad, and that as like in a risk-benefit analysis, that the risks outweigh the benefits, and we have to really have a clear conversation about that as a Ghanaian scientific and public health community, and make sure that we have a consensus about what is real and what's not, and then proceed from there. As far as the actual procurement goes, I can just say that in Ghana, we have to start conditioning our minds to the reality that the pandemic and herd immunity via vaccination is not going to be done until well into 2022. As of December 18th, Ghana had not procured independently any dose of any vaccine that was out there. We are primarily relying on the COVAX program to get us out of the situation. That COVAX program is really focused on getting 67 low-income countries the supplies that they need. Lucky for us, and of those 67 countries, a lot of them are African countries. Lucky for us, under Cyril Ramaphosa and the direction of the AU, we've also been able to have some great success with the African Vaccine Acquisition Initiative, which has been able to secure 600 million doses of the vaccine, which add on to 270 million doses that the COVAX program was going to give. That gives us 870 million of the 1.5 million we need. But the amount that's going to be available all the way through June around the continent is going to be 50 million doses. And as at Q1 2022, will still only be about 120, 130 million doses because of where we are in the the priority list for the vaccines and the procurement timelines that other countries took advantage of. So the good news that I think the African Vaccine Initiative, the AU program, that's something I think the South Africa and the Cyril Ramaphosa deserve tremendous credit for. They are currently in court also trying to get rid of the patent on the COVID-19, bypass patent laws on the COVID-19 vaccine so that there can be some local production. South Africa is gearing up for it. Nigeria is talking about it. And if South Africa can actually triumph in that, then we will have another real stream, which is local production around the continent. So in terms of procurement, big progress in the last 10 days. But in terms of the communication and information, we're obviously not seeing anything being done by the government in that respect. They've just said that they're going to get a vaccine. There's no communication about it. There's no education about it. And as Kwame consistently says, the risk communication component to that is still lacking. So that's where we are currently with terms of the procurement and the health information as I see it.
Yeah, so that's not really great news. So then it means we have to go back to enforcing the preventative measures, safety protocols, because it appears it's going to be a while before we actually start seeing the vaccines at our doorsteps. And even with that, we are still going to have to fight the misinformation, that is currently ongoing about the vaccines. I'll invite Thelma to share her thoughts on the vaccines.
Thank you, Afosa. I totally agree with Kwame and then Nana. We didn't want to be part of the vaccine trial in the first place. And it's like we are not even ready for it now, at least most of us. I'm not part though, I'm talking in reference to the general population. I keep saying that COVID has really laid bare the reason for us to do in-house backyard research. If COVID has been with us since March 12, and today is January 16, 2021, since March 12, 2022, 16 January 2021, do we have any data that we can make use of, meaningful? If we are not going to contribute to the vaccine, but whatever data we've been able to churn out now, useful data, is there something we can do with it? If we are not ready to receive the vaccine as we think it's whatever it will do to our populace, what do we have in place of that? Because it's a global pandemic. We can't throw our arms up in air and expect that the puzzles will fall in the right place. No, the virus is changing everything. This is the new normal. How do we cope with it? And I think as scientists in Africa here, even if we don't have the capacity, whatever we can, we should. And I think government should begin to see that we cannot rely on the West. We must have our own. Let's train our own. Yes, we might not, we are babies when it comes to probably research and infrastructure and having all equipment it takes to develop a vaccine. But I'm sure if we prioritize, it's possible that we can meet up. It's not light years away, so that we can come out with our very own based on our genetics, our makeup. We are not the same as the Caucasians, but we always wait for them to do every trial, and then we wait at the receiving end. What can we do from scratch at our backyard? I'm sure there are brains out there. I know the lead investigator for the Pfizer COVID vaccine. It's a Nigerian. Do you think he could have done this back home? I don't know. But if the right setting, the right tools, the right equipment, the right setup, the right freedom to research is available in his home country, I'm sure he can do it. So for me, that's my stand on it. If we are not ready to receive, to be at the receiving end, or for lack of a better term, guinea pigs, then let's set up our own so that we can say we know what went into it from the beginning, and this is the outcome. We are sure of it, we are ready to use it. Until then, we will be at the receiving end. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Thelma. So I mean, there's more to come in this conversation, and at this point, I'd really just want to go and talk about the numbers of people that have been vaccinated worldwide. And this is an integral part of our presentation when it comes to vaccines. We update our viewers on the numbers. So last week it was around 22 million people that had received vaccines worldwide. At this point, we are approaching about 36 million. So very soon we'll cross the 40 million mark. We'll get to the 50 million mark. And as you can see, it's the wealthy countries that are well ahead of us. The United States is ahead. China comes, United Kingdom comes, and then you have Israel. Israel is doing a fantastic job vaccinating their citizens. So again, the question is, when are we going to get vaccines for us in Ghana for use? And that is an interesting question that at some point during this discussion we'll address. Again, at this point, one thing we like to do is we like to tell our viewers that the vaccines that have been approved for use, and like all our panelists have said, have been well vetted and are safe for use. There are a few hitches along the line, but this is a new this is a pandemic that nobody expected. So we are learning as we go. So again, the conspiracy theories, the disinformation, before you share anything on vaccines or before you put anything out there, do well to vet it. Do well to check the source of your information before you put it out there. Edward, do you have any words to share before we take a quick commercial break?
What I'll reemphasize is that, like Kwame said before, we didn't really want to participate in the trial. There was a lot of things, but again, you don't blame Black people or people of African descent for not really trusting the health and all these trials because of history. But at the same time, science relies on data, and a lot of the scientific discoveries that has been made over the past decade has made this possible. We just didn't start making RNA vaccines overnight. They were actually technology that has been perfected over the years. So again, you have to get inoculated, get the antibodies so that we can stop this virus from mutating and also making our vaccines ineffective, possibly. And therefore, we encourage everyone, if we get opportunity to vaccinate, we shouldn't think about it twice. We should go ahead and have it.
All right, thank you very much. We'll be right back after this short break.
It is the senior most community pharmacist, Dr. Tuli.
Tompo Asembeng.
Oh, no lie. Then I say if your driver can't pick you, I make you people give me lift go. Shack is inside now. I'm gonna say it's on link copy. But
Tompo, 11 p.m.
Oh, if it comes a seed in the who give me, I guess some entanglement before that side.
You know they hear social distancing, eh?
To leap from D, same crowd, the whole. As I be young in the Amazon, are they cool? If you no go pick me to catch them in small left.
See, this be the problem. Who tell you say corona affects youngins? If you know they care about your life, if a guy say NSL over 50 years, away get hypertension, where poppy to be diabetic. Charlie them their corona will mess them up.
You are go wear face shield.
And that changes anything? That thing they protect only your eyes.
Plus face mask.
Charlie, the youth will they take this thing for granted. It may not kill you, but if it give you long-term damage to vital organs like your lungs, if you go get for outside cargo house, they give your OGs where them die. Will you be able to fend for yourself?
Chama, so I can say because unless I start they do Yahoo, I enter Benino, na funeral cost me this the COVID itself make it left one at top hole.
If people know they follow simple directions like social distancing, hand washing, wearing face mask and things, the COVID don't go anywhere. And the way they make careless there, it be like you no go left with anytime soon.
So to say my shadow make beans eh?
If you love yourself and the people around you, they house and take your shadow go do go back cry.
You are here, you more like dog me. So they kill my vibe cry.
But we take responsibility and keep fighting with positivity.
All right, viewers, welcome back. And we're going to continue with this discussion. Now, as you all may be aware, there appears to be a surge in cases in Ghana. And that is where this conversation is going to go next. Is this really the latest surge? Or is this something that has been going on for a long time? We have our panelists here to discuss this particular issue. At this point, I'd like to call on Nana Kofi.
Hi. Okay.
Yeah. So at this point, we're discussing the latest surge in COVID-19. What are your thoughts on this particular issue?
Well, I've been saying all week that it's really important that we have this conversation in the appropriate context. If you would, I think the third slide I sent, if you put that up, I can walk the viewers through that real quick. Actually, second slide would be fine. We're in a situation where for months now, we've seen a complete disregard for the physical distancing protocols, a complete disregard for mask wearing, a complete disregard for all the basic things we need to do to make sure that we can break the chains of transmission and prevent creating high-risk scenarios, high-risk situations that can be super spreader events. We have to understand, like, we've seen all those things happen. We saw all those things happening as far back as July, at which time we were seeing around that time 700, 800 cases a day in that range. Around that time, we basically made a couple of decisions around testing. That meant that our testing numbers, both in the facilities and hospitals and in our communities, both went down. In hospitals, in late June, we sent out a directive that said that we were going to have people, like the Ghana Health Center directive that redefined what a suspected case was, made it a lot narrower. And even that definition that came out in late June didn't include some of the most common symptoms like loss of smell, loss of taste. Then in mid-July, the second circular that goes out that makes it clear that Ghana is now going to only be testing asymptomatic cases. And heading into the end of July, beginning of August, you begin to see very, very steep declines in the number of daily tests we're doing around then. You see that for both tests in our hospitals and for people doing for people tested through contact tracing, which makes sense because if we are limiting the initial pool of index cases by redefining suspected cases, and then also doing slow contact tracing and everything, it makes sense that if one goes down, the other would go down. But it's quite clear that as it went down, the case numbers also went down. And those case numbers went down because the testing numbers were reducing primarily. And we saw that happening. We could monetize and track it in real time, the data. If you go to the next slide, I'll make a point about the WACDIP study too. Around that time, late July, early August, WACDIP begins its data collection for its study. That seroprevalence study where they try to estimate the amount of the percentage of people in the population of Accra and Kaswa who had COVID-19 antibodies. And what I have highlighted there in pink is a sampling period when those are being collected. Now, based on what we found out this week about the antibody sustainability, we know that pretty much everything to the left of that period would have covered the range of infection times. But after the time we got to this range, that sampling window for COVID-19, through which WACDIP estimated that we had 1.2 million infections in Accra and Kaswa alone, Ghana was still reporting fewer than 50,000 cases. Those two things were data points that should have informed us that the obvious fact that it actually gave us an estimate of just how little we are testing relative to the situation we have on hand. And it gave us a clear indication that we're going to have, if you had a seeding pool of 1.2 million cases, you were going to have a lot of community transmission. There's a separate question though about what the consequence of that transmission was going to be. We know that the strain in Ghana for the most part has been functionally similar to what they had in Wuhan. And as a result of that, we saw the same patterns of morbidity and mortality that they saw there, which meant that for a country where the average age is 20-21, the pattern of morbidity and mortality was always going to be different, and we're going to perform much better. But somehow we began to justify the low hospitalizations, like we started to use the low hospitalizations and low fatalities, and I'll say low in quotes here because also our data is delayed, and then reverse interpreted that to mean that if we have low hospital burden and low mortality burden, then we must have low infections, which this WACDIP study and the time frame we're talking about explicitly debunked. But for some reason, from that time where the testing was going down and the cases were going down, in coverage and in public communication from public officials, the testing part was left out and the cases part was emphasized. And that began to create a sense that everything was actually fine, that things were improving.
Right.
But even the folks at WACDIP at the time made it clear that that data from Ghana Health Service is grossly underrepresented, and even said that their estimate was an estimate because of the limited sensitivity of the antigen test, of the antibody test they used. So we should have been, based on what the science said, if we're doing really proper reporting and if we're being candid in public, in official communications, it should have been clear that we had actually gotten away with a scenario where we had failed in infection control and it just hadn't translated into something worse. But the risk always remained that if we had a new strain, we could have a situation where it could get more infectious, where so many people would get infected that even if a small percentage of them needed care, it would overwhelm the healthcare system. Or two, like in the case of South Africa, you might have a strain that seems to have some increased severity component to it. That scenario is where I believe we are now, where that unchecked transmission has met with very likely, something new in the system, because we are seeing Ghana Health Service themselves reporting a record number of severe and critical cases over the 300+ days of this pandemic last week. And we are hearing anecdotal evidence from every facility that Nyaho is full, that 37 is full, that all the critical care centers are full, to the point that now we are relying on Ghana East for some amount of ICU care, which is not set up to do. So I don't think we
Nana Kofi, we'll continue with that discussion. I just want to bring in Kwame to share his thoughts before we get to, a little more into detail. So Kwame, we are still on the issue of the latest surge. From what Nana Kofi is saying, it appears it's not really just for quite some time, because it looks like observance of all these protocols and the measures just broke down. I want to hear your thoughts on this particular issue.
Well, you see, it's sometimes as a country we surprise ourselves in how consistently inconsistent we are. And why do I say so? We sat in this country and had public health officials claiming that mass gatherings had no impact on contagion and the spread of this pandemic. In doing so, they created the impression that, you could gather around and all that. And you see, that's why I always concentrate on risk communication. That was a downgrade of our risk communication, which then gave the false impression to the general population that you could party, you could go around, you could not wear your face mask, you could ignore hand hygiene, you could ignore social distancing, and that didn't have an impact on the spread of the pandemic. What did that mean? We all got complacent. The point was that at that time, because the virus was already present in the country, we gave it opportunity to spread, albeit at a slower pace because it spreads by an exponential growth based on the reproductive number. So at that time, maybe it was spread in 1, then 3, then 9, then 27. But as the exponents kept going up, by the time we finished our political campaigns, there were enough people asymptomatic in the general population willing to spread. So by the time we got to Christmas, where all protocols, if you look on social media, no one has to tell you, had fallen off the rails. People were infecting people in droves. What that meant was that the more susceptible and those with hyperactive immune systems were then going to get sicker. And what happened? They clogged our facilities, our designated COVID facilities. More importantly, like Nana Kofi has shown with the testing, only 10% of our daily testing was attributable to free testing, because over 65% of our testing was attributable to Kotoka. Then there was the testing that was due to people who had to travel out of the country and people who had to test because they worked in the mines or on the oil rigs and all that. And then the 10% were the people who were falling sick and actually going into the health facility. What does that mean? It means that for a pandemic where 85% of people are asymptomatic, the people who are clogging our health facility are actually about 10, give it 15% of the people who are actually carrying the virus. And if at this point in time, they are clogging our health facilities that much, and we are not testing because the people who are getting ill are not going to test because they have to pay between 300 and 1,000 Ghana cedis just to get a test. Only God knows what's going on in the general population. And that is why I have the view that it is not about travelers that's causing the surge. It is more about the negligence in the general population. And that is what we have to deal with. If we don't start risk communicating properly, this is not going to change. And we probably will get worse.
So So it appears the government response has also fueled, this current spike in cases, because like you said, it was made to seem as if campaigning and all those political activities were fine. And not too long ago, we had a communication from the Minister of Communication, who was saying that campaign activities did not contribute to the recent spike. But as you have clearly explained to us, it was something that was brewing in the pot, and we've gotten to the point where exponentially we've gotten to really high numbers, and now all the vulnerable in our society. That's a very worrying issue.
Yes, yeah, but you have to look at it, Daniel. Just before you go, you have to look at it from the point of view that if what the Minister of Communication was saying was right, then Christmas couldn't be accounting for the spike.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
clearly, there's some cognitive dissonance in his communication, and
Right.
that is something that we need to address.
So we need to hold them, accountable. We need to push them, and I think this is I would want to bring in Nee briefly to talk about media coverage. Last week we had a conversation on the media coverage of COVID-19, and I just want him to share his thoughts. Has there been any change in the way it has been put out there? Has the discourse changed? Have there been any changes in the tone?
From my observation, I've noticed that a lot of individualized stories are being told. So now the COVID is being told through the eyes of individual people who suffered, and journalists themselves are coming out, like Raymond Aqua was on Joy, and then another journalist from City has also been sharing her experiences of a COVID journey. So there's been an individualized kind of, hey guys, this is real. These are the effects. This is what I'm going through. Take care of yourselves and so on. So there's been a bit of that across the media this week, and there's been a kind of rise in attention back to COVID. What is worrying, though, and I'm sure Nana Kofi Kwache and Kwame Sapon Asedu may speak to this as well, is the emphasis on personal responsibility, right? And we know that people don't operate in a vacuum, right? People operate in a particular social context. So it depends on the messaging, right? And it depends on the structures that have been put in place in terms of testing, contact tracing, etc., that will shape people's perceptions about what's going on. Last week, remember, we were talking about that, the fact that people actually think we're in a post-COVID era. And I think the media coverage this week is kind of bringing back attention to COVID-19. So I'm hoping that it continues and the coverage just gets better and better. And I'm hoping more journalists will push back against the personal responsibility narrative without the context in which this personal responsibility and the behaviors are being shaped by the structures, systems, and messages that they are hearing from the government, the media, and other private citizens as well. So I'll end here so that folks will have more time to speak.
Okay, yeah. So thank you very much, Nee. And I want us to, this conversation is ongoing. There's a lot to talk about. One of the major things we wanted to talk about was on the school reopenings, and if we have the data to tell us if it is actually safe to do that. So I'd want to bring in Thelma briefly to tell us her opinion on the school reopenings. What are her sentiments as a parent? What are her sentiments? What does she think?
Thank you, Daniel. So I would have to speak with two faces, one as a parent and one as probably an academic. So I'll start with as an academic. The numbers clearly are showing us that it is going up. Whether it was massaged previously and now because there's no need for people to gather in large numbers, so we now should see the figures as it is or not. It's scary to have kids go back to school. But what are the other options? Because they've done a lot of virtual. Is it going to be virtual for the rest of their lives until we find a permanent solution to COVID? The psychologists will have to help us on that one, because children learn when they play. How do they play virtually? That is not possible. So we would have to marry the two. They can't do virtual learning forever. I'm talking with reference to basic school. And kindergarten is even scarier, but they can't also learn virtually till we find a permanent solution to COVID. They learn as they play. They can't do that virtually forever. That's on one hand. As a parent, I'm really petrified because even adults are throwing precautionary measures to the wind. How will a child wash their hands properly at school? How many teachers are in a class to even ensure these precautionary measures? Maybe in private schools, they might have a lot of attendants. That's what they call them in a class that will help the main teacher to check these. Government schools, how many attendants do you have that can assist? Will a 5-year-old be able to wash their hands properly, following all the steps? Do you think a teacher would have time to watch that each and every child in the class washes their hands properly? The last time I checked, they're supposed to close either 12 p.m. or 2 p.m. So that's supposed to limit the time they will spend in school. But then the time that they are there, who ensures the precautionary measures? Parents are not there. Even if we help out with a few logistics, be it liquid soap or hand sanitizers or tissues, when it comes to the proper precautionary measures, who is there to assist? There needs to be a lot of training. I feel some form of training should have come before schools would have reopened. Fumigation has been done across. At least the university I teach at, fumigation has been done. Some basic schools too, they have done fumigation. But the human resource, we need to have trained them over and over and let them have a feel of how it will be like when children come back. Children are not like adults. Even adults, like I said, are throwing precautions to the wind. They like to play with their friends. I mean, how would you explain to a child, don't share your pencil or eraser and stuff like that? So a lot of training for me, should have gone on for these teachers before students are sent back to school.
So Thelma, what this means is that it looks like preparing or getting the road set for school reopenings wasn't really done. And at this point, I'd want to bring Nana Kofi in. Nana Kofi, what do the numbers say? Was there anything pertaining to positivity rates being below a certain number before this decision to reopen schools was made, or can you just talk to this issue?
Yeah, actually, if we can put up the fourth slide, I can walk us through that. So the WHO is basic standard for where a country should be in terms of its test positivity rate, which is to say, for every 100 people we test, how many of them are going to actually have COVID-19, is that you want that number to be under 5. That gives you a sense that you are testing at a level that gives you an accurate perspective of the state of the pandemic. And it also allows you to know that you have low enough infection rates or low enough virus in circulation that you can afford to spend some of the risk budget you have given what you can do with contact tracing and testing and hospital capacities on opening this part of social life. But a lot of the time, this comes down to a question of priorities in that kind of decision making. Ghana, since May 1, has not really, frankly, very rarely, almost never, been under that 5% mark. And in fact, there are times we've been as high as 20% to hit 30%. And currently, right now, as we speak, we are still well over the 10% in terms of the contact tracing and community pool and private testing group that would need to know that things are safe. The thing is, when we reopened schools on a trial basis in June, the scenario was the exact same thing, where we said that schools were safe and that the atmosphere wasn't going to be problematic or whatever. But you can see that at the time when we made that decision, again, we're about 10% for hospitals, about 15% actually for the community at that time. We are lower for the community, about there for the hospitals. But in the wake of that, of those reopenings, you begin to see a pretty steep rise in the test positivity rate. from June 15 onward to peaking at August 30. It's a correlation, not a causation, because there were other things that were going on at that time, including the MPP's primaries, which are pretty hotly contested. People were gathering and that kind of thing. And also around the time when we had the preparations for the voter registration exercise and the like. So all those things are in there and could possibly explain that rise. But we know that we saw a rise in positivity after that. That has never actually been acknowledged. In fact, the government has come out constantly say that the reopening of schools had no impact on the spread of COVID-19. It's the same thing, like Kwame pointed out, that they said about, you know, public transport not being a conduit for COVID-19, public rights not being a conduit for COVID-19. And it seems too often to be a question of convenience than the actual science. Now, if we're saying that, if we're looking at so if you're looking at community risk, the community risk right now is really quite great. The question though is about, again, like Thelma was saying, the balance between those rights to health and rights to education, because we know that the outcomes in a virtual environment are also highly inequitable. The poorest kids in the most disadvantaged areas are the ones who lose out the most, and are the ones who also can afford the least to lose out on that education. So we have a difficult situation. But now we've had a scenario where we've been away from schools for almost a year. And in that time, what have we actually done in terms of education system strengthening to make it safer? We are saying that, okay, universities can open because we're going to do physical distancing and classrooms are going to be virtual. Dorms aren't virtual and dorms are pretty full right now.
Right.
If we are saying that, you know, if we're saying that we're going to open, you know, they're going to have the elementary schools and middle schools go back, JSS and primary school, like Thelma said, Ghanaian adults themselves are not following the prescriptions, and there's definitely not the kind and extent of capacity and know-how among the teaching community and educational staffing community for the numbers of students that are going back right now to know that we're safe. We're saying that we're going to matching hospitals to schools and making sure that facilities are mapped on and everything. When only a couple of 100,000 of them were in school for the final year students, we saw what happened at Accra Girls, where they had cases there and there was absolute bedlam. There was obviously no real structure in place to make sure that there was a protocol that people were supposed to follow. So we know that in terms of the risk, it's there. We know that there's a really serious question about the educational losses in this time. We know that also the government has not done the kind of work we need to see and the training we need to see, like Thomas said, to get the staffing, the staff and personnel in the education system to a level where they can adequately take care of this thing. But just like June, it looks like we're going to go ahead with this anyway. So the question now is, what are we going to do about testing and screening? Why are we sitting here where we know that we have approved an antigen test for use at Kotoka International Airport that is in no way superior to things that are on the market, that is in no way special with sensitivity, that is a run-of-the-mill immunofluorescence antigen test that even what is being used in India for $7 outperforms? Why can we not approve more of those here to have a low-cost screening alternative to make sure we can lower the risk? What are we going to do about contact tracing, scaling up that kind of work so that we know that if there are outbreaks, we can detect them early and trace them? That's the stuff that we need to hear more about to have a firm idea about how exactly things are going and where we're going to be. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm hoping that we will hear soon, because if you're looking at it just from a public health perspective, this is not the time to reopen these schools. But there are obviously other competing priorities in a broader human rights framework that we have to think about.
All right, thank you, Nana Kofi. I'd want to bring in Kwame to share his thoughts. And Kwame, I'd want you to speak to this issue. As a parent, would you be comfortable having your kids go to school? And what do you think we should be doing to address this issue? Hello, Kwame. Hello, Kwame.
I mean, here's me. Yeah,
yes,
hello.
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes, we can hear you. Did you hear my question? I was asking, as a parent, would you be comfortable? Yes, I can hear you. I was asking if you'd be comfortable having your kids go to school. Yes.
Yeah, I did hear. Yeah. Yeah, I'm saying I'm going to be very contextual in my answer. and one, and I have self-administered COVID tests at home. Because of the sort of job I do, I'm supposed to test myself twice a week. And the antigen tests, and I'm supposed to report tests every time I do test myself. I have enough tests to test my family entirely, because it shouldn't just be me, just someone is carrying it and I don't know and I'm in the latent stage or something like that. But still, my children are at home. With all these facilities, my children are home. Why? Because the UK has taken a decision that with a spike in numbers and the fact that they have vaccines, they are better off immunizing at least 15 million of the population of 70 million, who are the highly risked people. And as they ramp up vaccination, open up, and the children can go back to school, so that they don't risk the children going to school, being carriers, albeit their case mortality ratio is low, less than 0.2%, coming to infect parents and grandparents and ending up being orphans. So this is the environment I live in. Now, would I, on the basis of all the securities I have and my children being at home, wish that my sister, my cousin, my auntie, my friends' children will go to school, knowing that they could potentially come and infect them? And with the sort of health system we have, where going to have routine checkups is not the norm, but the exception, people will not even know their chronic disease status and probably might fall foul to this virus. Say, let them go to school. The answer is no.
Right.
And it is no, because much as on paper I see impressive protocols put in place by the Ghana Health Service, Ministry of Education and all that to keep the schools safe. Based on what I see on social media, based on what I see on the reportage, I know these would be atypical niches of seclusion, which is not the normal default of the society. When the children are commuting from school and to school, they would be going through the normal norms of the society, and therefore there will be massive spread. So I don't worry about the children. I worry about the ripple effect. And on that basis, I would rather we get our act together, get our risk communication right, ensure the right behaviors exist, and then open up.
All right, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on this issue. It's a mouthful, or it's a handful. On the other hand, you hear a lot of parents jubilating, and I found that quite surprising when a lot of parents were jubilating that it's time to go to school, the kids must go, we are tired of them. But it's worrying. And again, I think this plays to how well we haven't communicated the risk to the citizenry of how COVID-19 can wreak havoc in families. And like Nana Kofi said, and like Nee said, now it looks like there are so many anecdotes. And I've heard some people put it on social media. I know 2 families that lost people. I know this. I know 2 brothers that died. But there is communication, and that is what Kwame has been, emphasizing this whole time. The risk communication is very low. I want us to take a quick break, and whilst we go on this, I just want to play a couple of videos. The first one is from the Ga East municipality. This was an interview that was conducted, and we credit TV3 for this. That is actually telling us that the significant rise in cases that we are seeing is not really due to imported cases, as is being shown, but it has been with us in our community. Just
those in the HDU, high dependency unit, and the emergency room, they are all community cases. If you know about the president's directive, those coming from the airports are brought here, but they usually have mild disease or they are asymptomatic, and they occupy the recovery area. But because we move them out, they are not a lot. So I would say about 70 to 80% of our patients are coming from the community.
Welcome back, viewers. And just before we went on that break, I played a short clip that clearly was telling us that the cases we are getting in Ghana are not really due to imported cases, as is being spread by some of these communication people, but really there's deep community spread. I have with me Nana Kofi. And Nana Kofi, when you were on this show 2 weeks ago, you actually brought this topic up where you talked about what impact the arrivals at Kotoka were having on our cases. I just want you to briefly touch on this issue. Why is that narrative still being peddled that the cases we are seeing are just imported cases?
Well, I mean, that's what question that I really can't answer because it's quite baffling to me. It's worrying to me because it seems to be following a persistent pattern. I've written about this in every article I've done on COVID so far, about this notion that Ghana's problem is primarily one of imported cases. On March 20th, when we had 16 cases, 3 of them were from community spread. And we continued even beyond then to deny the fact that that was happening. When you had 3 cases where we couldn't explain, they had no known contact with anybody else who had COVID-19 that we knew of, and had no travel history. And we knew that then, and continued to say for weeks after that, that we didn't have any significant community spread. That's a question, that's a technical question. And that was something that was empirically true from their own data. And we still had that communication going on from there. We saw that around the time, and I find this important case thing hilarious because you have around the time the airports are opening when we are talking about why doesn't Ghana have a quarantine component. Dr. Bernard Okoboy coming out to tell us that the testing, the 2-layer testing was basically fail-proof and that it would prevent 99% of cases coming to the country. We have detected 800 plus cases at Kotoka since then. We have seen the positivity rate rise since then. But the notion that those cases represent the driver of what's going on in Ghana, that doesn't make much sense. There's a possibility that we imported one of the strains through the loopholes at Kotoka, right? And by that I mean the fact that some of the PCR testing some of the PCR test results that were being submitted pre-departure, some of the COVID-19 results that were being submitted pre-departure by travelers were not always PCR. Sometimes they were antibody tests or antigen tests, and sometimes they were not real. We've had a lot of anecdotal around that. We know people have, that's been proven at this point. And that actually explains why you'd have a false positive or false negative rate of a PCR test rising, which doesn't make any sense if you think about it. It would only change because something about who is coming has changed, and that should not be influenced by, that shouldn't change the accuracy of the PCR. So we know that there's a loophole there. So there's a possibility we get imported a strain, but we need to get away from this notion that the surge in cases that's going on is people coming to Ghana and then getting sick, or that the people around them are the problem. This is the same logic we used when we're going to the first lockdown. That led us to think that if we tested travelers and their contacts, then Ghana's COVID-19 problem will be solved in March. So when we finished that work, we called off the lockdown and then we said everything was fine. And here's look at what happened in August. Look what's happening now. So we know that the imported case narrative, it only carries water in as much as there is a very real risk because that testing wasn't field-proof and we did not require quarantine on arrival, that we imported a strain from one of maybe the UK strain or SA strain, or maybe even the one that's going on in Brazil. Because bear in mind, those strains were detected there. It doesn't necessarily mean that's where they started.
Right.
But when it comes to the question of that, those are making up the majority of cases, or those are the ones that are driving infections, that's ludicrous. We've seen a political campaign season where all the things that were happening there were in breach of everything we know needs to stop the spread of COVID-19. And we saw a party and holiday season, which was maybe even worse. And the fact that we would have both of those things happen and then be trying to still say that our problem is imported cases, it's something we have to actually be honest about, because if we don't diagnose the problem correctly, we will not offer the correct solution.
Right.
The president, last time he spoke, put in place mandatory isolation for arriving passengers who are positive. That doesn't address the fact that if you had 800 and something cases, 860 something cases testing positive on the antigen test in Accra, it meant that you were also missing, because of its sensitivity limitations, about 100 cases that had gone to the country with no quarantine requirements. So if you say you're going to fix that problem, even if that was really a problem you think it is, doing further isolation and no quarantine does not actually solve the problem. So if we are even not solving that problem that we say we have correctly, and then we are going to misdiagnose a very obvious surge in cases in morbidity and mortality as some question of travelers arriving in Ghana, we are not taking this seriously. And we actually need to understand that that's not consistent with the science. It's not consistent with what is actually going on the ground, like the news reports actually confirmed. And that needs to be called out for the pseudoscience it is. The problem we have is extensive community spread, and we need to confront that.
Yes. So I want to bring in Nee briefly. Nee, so there are so many narratives that are making it is not the election and the political season that led to the cases, or it's imported cases and all that. I want you to talk to the media narrative. How is the media challenging these false narratives that are being put out?
Yeah, to be honest, I think some high-profile programs are not doing that well, in the sense that there's a default to always interview politicians for everything. And they are not public health people, right? And often, sometimes the things they say are really shocking. For example, Oseche Mensabunsu was on Newsfile this morning saying that they organized rallies, and even when he was attempting to enforce safety protocols and tell people to physically distance and things, people refused. But then he didn't stop the rallies. He continued to organize more rallies, right? But at the same time, we are hearing from these very same politicians, right, downplaying, how much damage they've done with the political rallies and the mass gatherings that they were organizing up and down Ghana. But then they're the same people who are giving so much airtime to come and speak. So there's a problem of challenging the narrative when you're constantly putting the microphone in front of people who are deliberately obfuscating or, just not dealing with the truth. And so that's part of a problem that I think the media outlets need to grapple with. They need to stop giving so much airtime to politicians. They need to give the mic back to Kwame and Nana Kofi and Thelma and so on to actually speak to the issues, right? Depoliticize, quote unquote, in a sense, so that we can deal with actually what's happening and not speculate on opinions based on politicians, whims and caprices, right? So that's my main problem with what's happening generally. And this is a problem that plagues media everywhere, right? Where the microphone is always in front of politicians. Now, so to shift the narrative, that's one way we need to go, right? Just take the mics away from the politicians, right? Talk to the academics who have been talking, right? And it's not as if, academics and researchers and experts and people who have physically been sick and experienced COVID haven't been speaking. They have, right? But their words don't carry the same amount of attention and weight as the politicians. So the politicians will say something on a Facebook page and it immediately becomes news, on some media website somewhere. And that's where we need to go, right? We need to shorten the amount of airtime we give them and then give it to folks who are really interested in fixing the problem in the first place. So, and that's why these narratives are also difficult to challenge, right? That's why imported cases narratives is coming back. That's why mass gatherings don't cause COVID-19. And that's why this problem of personal responsibility, which I really push against, is also coming back. Because, for example, you lifted restrictions on the number of people in trotros, and they know very well that you can't physically distance in a trotro. So then how are you saying there's a structure in place that is allowing the community spread to continue to go, right? The chains of transmissions aren't being broken by any active government intervention. Countries had lockdowns, they had restrictions, they zoned certain communities. So you are red zone, blue zone, green zone, whatever it is. And people knew how infections were occurring in different zones and what their risk perceptions of those zones were. We are virtually not doing any of that. And then the first excuse we give is now to shift all the blame for the rise in cases on just people's attitudes and behaviors, which again, I keep on insisting doesn't occur in the vacuum. So
Exactly.
let me just end here, and I'd love to hear what Nana Kofi Kwache and Kwame Asiedu.
Yeah, so I'll bring on Kwame to add his voice to this particular discussion.
Well, like me said, when you hear people say that mass gatherings do not cause exponential growth, when there's 100 years of data from the Philadelphia March in 1918 during the Spanish flu, through the Hong Kong flu in the 1960s, through COVID spikes in the United States, thanks to Donald Trump, saying that the data in Ghana contradicts all the body of evidence. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to say the last person to have a microphone stuck in front of them in a pandemic should be a politician. However, we also have to bear in mind that our radio, TV stations, and other portals are money generating ventures. And therefore, they want people who drive traffic. They don't want Kwame to come and sit on there and say, this is a load of rubbish, or not to say the data doesn't match up to the narrative. Because that they can get their foot soldiers to come and insult you on Twitter and Facebook. And that is the brigade they are building. But the narrative in the electronic media must suit the agenda. And that is what needs to change, because unfortunately, media is supposed to suit the agenda of the society, not those in governments. But we have truncated that level of thinking to the point whereby we have set up media to speak for government or the opposition. So if you look at our media space, you can tell the clear midline of who speaks for government and who speaks for the opposition and who's trying to be neutral. That hasn't helped us in this pandemic, because if the government is getting it wrong and you say it, it is carried differently from media station to media station. And therefore, the receivers of the information, which is the general population, who have to effect the behavioral change to keep all of us safe, also respond. That has to change moving forward, because if we don't, especially where we are now, and I'm not being funny, I wrote on Facebook and Twitter 2 days ago that this pandemic may not be killing in Africa as much as it is elsewhere, albeit we don't have our excess data, and so I cannot stick up to my neck fully and say definitely it's not killing, because for we may know some deaths due to COVID having been reported because the person has died at home and stuff like that. But from official data across the continent, it's not doing much. But what do you see? If you are critical in looking at the deaths, it's taking away our valuable human resource. Can the continent afford the level of losses? I know of a consultant doctor who's died. I know of a lecturer who's died. I know of a director of human resources who's died, all due to COVID. Do we have the pipeline to replace them? No. Therefore, means assertion of the role of the media in not highlighting these things and not making us aware that politicking with they say, oh, we are not dying and all those, without realizing that those who actually churn the productivity in our economy and drive our GDP are the ones who are dying. It's not healthy, and we need to stop it.
Hello. Thank you very much, Kwame, for sharing your thoughts on this issue. I think we've gone far beyond the time we try to give to this particular discussion, but that shows you how important it is. I mean, COVID-19 is really wreaking havoc in our societies. In Ghana, just as Kwame said, the excess mortality data and all that, we don't have access to all that. So it may appear as if, oh, it's not doing that much damage to us, so we're good. But that is really not the case. And 2 weekends ago, Nana Kofi said it out there. There is an issue that we are not really addressing. Ni also addressed it last week, that the media is not even covering it, which has to do with the long-term implications of COVID for even those who survive infection. COVID is not just a life or death issue. There are many people who survive it, but then come out with a lot of different different conditions. There are those who are getting kidney failure. There are those who are losing their limbs. So COVID is a serious issue. That is all time will allow us for this particular segment, which is on COVID. But before I go, I want to take some last thoughts from with Thelma. Hi, Thelma. So can you just give us your last thoughts before we head out and wrap up this section?
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I believe the panelists for today have said a lot. So I'll just try to tie everything up. COVID is very real, it's very rife with us. There has been some untruths with the numbers and the interventions that should be put in place regards to precautionary measures, prevention of transmission, or even to enable testing. It's not in place as it should. It's not optimal. Schools reopening. Clearly, we are just not ready, but children cannot stay at home forever until we find a permanent solution to COVID. So schools must be open, but the measures should be put in place. And I think that individuals taking personal responsibilities in this part of our world, in Ghana, it's not going to work. Because we've seen what has gone through just the ended election, the festive season. It's like people have forgotten COVID is still with us. So there must be some interventions by government. It can be segmented, but funding, there should be money put in place. These interventions don't come cheap, but we must put them in place to ensure that we break the transmissions, okay? And we put in place a system. It might not be perfect, but as the need arises, we put in the changes. But a system should be in place and be working so that we can curb this transmission. It will make us to live with COVID even better. And I will say it again, we must do our own research. Since March 12th to today, January 16, 2021, our scientists, I know we have a lot of academics and scientists who are doing a great deal of research. Can we make use of it? Can government be at least interested in helping for this kind of research to take some shape or form? You never know how far it will take us. The vaccine, we must begin to educate our society, opinion leaders, CSOs. We must prepare ourselves to take the vaccine. If we don't, what are the options we have? COVID started in Wuhan. It found itself in Ghana. Now there's a vaccine. Pfizer was not established 2 years ago. Pfizer has churned out medications that are life-saving. So we will not say their vaccine is improper. Anybody who has issues with the vaccine, they know the right channel. I also will stress that pharmacovigilance is extremely key here. The vaccine is new. We know the rush with which, should I say, rush and the need for it. So definitely there might be a few issues, but it doesn't mean the vaccine should be thrown out. Pharmacovigilance we should kickstart it. Just when we get the vaccine into Ghana, pharmacovigilance should and must start. We don't have another option. It is the vaccine. Media gets involved. I remember Amodakwen. Wow. I remember the Amodakwen issue. When Amodakwen is actually first line in the treatment of malaria in Ghana. Right. But there was an issue with the dosing and the side effect. And I think the media blew it out of proportion. It had rippling effect. We know the power of the media. Can we use the same power in the right way to begin to educate our populace about the vaccine and the fact that it is useful? Right. Everything is education. Let's educate our people. Let's educate ourselves to be ready to receive it. As it is now, we don't have another option. There's no drug as it is now that can cure COVID. So let's prepare our minds. Let the media kickstart. Do the education. Let us prepare our minds. However, intervention or procedure or way government will put in place to get in the vaccine, I'm sure they will, so that we get our people vaccinated.
All right, thank you very much. I'll move on to can you just share a few short words with us before you depart?
Yeah, Thomas touched on pretty much the thing I wanted to end with, which is about making the media needs to also, really take a step back and reflect on where we are and its contribution to that and the power it has to really help turn things around. I hope that they will take that to heart as constructive criticism. I know it's a tough critique when so many other groups are involved in the situation we're in, but they have the information role in our society. And I hope that they reflect on that both when it comes to vaccine communication, to communication about the numbers, to the way they report and cover what's going on with COVID in Ghana, because we need to get that risk framework set up correctly so that when it comes to the the infection mitigation things that we need to do from now to 2022, those things are happening. And so like Thelma said, that we can actually get a vaccine rollout that works and that's effective. The question about investing in science makes a whole lot of sense, because if we didn't have WACPIP doing on their own that seroprevalence study, it would have been tough. Like people like Kwame and I would have still been going on air and having to answer questions like, but people are not dying. How do you know? That was an empirical data point that was critical to proving the case that what the government was saying about the numbers or what the numbers were looking like from Ghana Health Service was a gross understatement that it was not really representative. So we need to look at investing in that. Right now, we should really be investing. We should be giving WACPIP a lot of money to be doing genomic surveillance right now, because we need that information to know where we are and understand the risk we are facing right now. So all that stuff about research, investment, and the communication stuff that we need to get started now, couldn't agree more.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nana. I'll go to Kwame for his final thoughts before he leaves.
Yeah, I think I'd end by saying we need to have a great understanding of where our prevalence sits at the moment. The data we have on COVID in Ghana is, to be very economical, dishonest. What is being reported from every single facet. I mean, when you have data where deaths are reported up to 60 days later, I mean, there's some, about 3-4 months ago, where Nana Kofi were doing some correlation, and some of the deaths A death in May reported in September, a death in June reported in November. It's crazy. So our data is not consistent. So zero prevalence is our only saving grace for us to know the level of prevalence in our society. But the last thing I would say is we must remember that wild exposure to COVID only affords you between 5 to 8 months of immunity. Hence, the vaccines being given and between 3 to 12 weeks, a booster being given, so it can extend to about a year, as the Moderna data is letting us all know. So we should remember that all those who were infected in March when we had our first case, even though based on anecdotal evidence, like Nana Kofi said in earlier about some of the cases who had no travel links but happened in March, it probably might go to February. A lot of those people, which is about close to 35, 40,000 of the legally reported numbers, are now susceptible.
Right.
And we need to carry this as part of our thinking. Because if we go into any modeling that factors them in as giving us saving grace, we would have ourselves to blame. Because a lot of them will get reinfected again. And the data coming out on reinfection also indicates that there's a hypersensitivity reaction because you have pre-exposure. And sometimes the end of disease is much more lethal than the initial suffering that the person had. As a country, we need to start thinking about this.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your thought. And just to inform our viewers that Kwame Sapong will be with us next week. So join us next week for another part of this conversation. Is Nee still with us here? Yeah, Nee, just some final words before you leave.
Yeah, so I'll just keep it brief. I really appreciate the conversations we're having on this platform. Like I said last week, these are the platforms people should be flocking to really get a sense of what's really happening. And unfortunately, I hope folks in the media outlets, I know they're also struggling under the weight of COVID as well, and they are also eager to see things get back to normal. But then if we don't address this honestly and strategically, it's not going to get better. It's just going to drag out for a long time. And so I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate the panelists, and I hope this platform continues to grow as we continue to educate ourselves. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Nee. So yes, there you have it. We're done with this section of this particular conversation. Would like to thank all our panelists for being with us. Thelma Alaubila joined us, Nico Te Nikoi, Nana Kofi Kwache, and then Kwame Sapong Asiedu, who will be with us again next week. Thank you all for being with us. At this point, I'll bring in my co-host, Edward, to take on the next part of this conversation. Hi, Edward.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so great conversation so far. We're going to switch quickly to Dr. Enoch Kobina, who is going to give us some information about how drugs are approved, especially in Ghana, and then we'll carry the conversation from there. So I'm going to bring in Dr. Kobina to tell us about himself, what are the things that he's done, and to help us answer some few questions. Hello, Kobina, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. And how about you, Eddie?
I'm doing great. All right. So I'd like for you to tell our listeners who you are and what you've been doing and the great things that you've been doing for the society.
Oh, okay. First of all, I would like to thank Eddie and the organizers for this privilege to share some knowledge on drug regulation. I began my career as a pharmacist in Ghana after completing KNUST Bachelor of Pharmacy degree. and then worked for the Food and Drugs Authority for some time. I was actually involved with the creation of the Sunyane Regional Office. So we are the pioneers. Most of the structures that were built came from us, myself, and then Mrs. Nora Nakite Lavi. So from there, I did I took some courses and programs in Europe, went back to Ghana to teach at Kumasi Technical University, then came to study at the PhD level, pharmaceutical sciences and statistics. And currently I work for the pharmaceutical industry. We are more interested in developing drugs, new therapies for new indications and complex diseases. So that is it about Enoch. Enoch has expertise in statistics, pharmaceutical sciences, mainly pharmacokinetics, and then pharmacodynamics, and those related to quality assurance and quality management systems.
Great. Thank you very much for that wonderful, I should say, information that you've given us about yourself. We're going to go in straight and ask you some few questions about how drugs are approved in Ghana. So what really goes into the drug approval process in Ghana?
Yeah, I think this is a difficult question to answer in just with some few words. But before I actually address that question, I want you to understand the drug development process. Once you understand the drug development process and then the marketing authorization and all the processes involved, I think you will appreciate the role of regulation of drugs in Ghana. So first of all, we have what we call drug discovery. Let me see if I can share something, and then we can move from there. So, okay, good. Just a moment. Trying to share something for all of us. Then we can move there. Good. So if you can see my screen, I hope you can see my screen.
Not yet. Yeah, we haven't seen it yet.
Okay, then maybe you just give a minute, you see the screen. So whilst we are waiting for the screen to show, I'll go ahead with what goes into the drug regulation. So first of all, you have to look at how the processes involved in the discovery, then the development, and then the marketing authorization of a drug. Just a moment, audience, I'm sorry. I think I have a technical challenge here. Let me share. Good. Good. I think this time it should appear. Do we have it?
I think it's showing your email, but you might have to switch it to.
Okay, good. All right. So first of all, I think I can just walk you through without the slide.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we have the discovery process. So I mean, you discover drugs. You discover drugs. So you have the discovery process, and then we have the development process. So the development, we have the preclinical stage, and we have the clinical trials, and then we have manufacturing, marketing authorization, and post-marketing activities. Now, I think we have to understand that drugs are of various types, right? We have chemical-based drugs, which can be of natural origin or which can be of synthetic chemical origin. And then we have biologics, which include cells, protein-based drugs.
Yeah.
And then we have genomics. So all of them are considered as drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And they are considered as drugs because they are able to change a biological system to the point that you can use that change as a way to diagnose a disease or to cure a disease or to treat it or even to prevent it. All right. So because these agents or entities are able to change a biological system and then be used for diagnosis, treatment, and all those kind of things. They are drugs. Now, for some of them, we don't have to discover them because we have used them over time. These are the allopathic agents, including herbal medicines. Okay, so for herbal medicines, by practice, we don't need to actually discover them. But for most drugs, we have to discover them. That is identifying your targets and then identifying the drug candidate. So from there, you take the drug into the developmental stage. So you discover the drug and you take it into the developmental stage, where you perform series of experiments to test whether the drug is safe, efficacious, or whether you can understand the mechanisms and then the PK/PD relationships. So that is where actually drug development starts, at the preclinical level, where you test it in cell systems or what we call as in vitro systems, and then even in animals like the non-human primate and then the rats. From there, you move to the clinical trial stages. So the preclinical stage is actually an information gathering stage where you gather information and decide, can we now test this drug or these candidates in humans? So once you have adequate safety information, efficacy information, some understanding of the mechanisms, you can now move into clinical trials, where we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, depending on the kind of study and the type of population you are dealing with. Again, over there, you're also looking at the safety, the efficacy, and then the PK/PD relationships, as well as the mechanisms that mediate the effects of the drug. Now, this is one of the most critical stages in drug development. So I was following the discussions on COVID. You realize that for COVID, it was tested in different populations. Sometimes you have people, about 30,000 people enrolled in the phase 3 trials. All of them are just to gather information about the safety. Is it safe? Is it efficacious? Do we understand the movement of the drug in the body? And all these things are done under strict standards.
Correct.
For preclinical, you do it under what they call the GLP, that's the good laboratory practices. For clinical trials, it is under the good clinical practices. So from the clinical trials, you apply to register your new drug. All right. So once you are given the approval, you have to manufacture the drug, and then you have to get a marketing authorization to bring the drug into the market. So this is just to give us the basis of the drug development process. Now, what does the regulatory body do? The regulatory body is to ensure that all these processes are done and are done well. So they are there to ensure that the drugs we have are safe, number one. Number two, they are efficacious. And then number three, they are of the quality. So that is what I can say about what the drug regulatory bodies are expected to do.
Great discussion about how drugs are discovered and how we tend to approve drugs, especially in Ghana and all around the world. You don't just put drugs out there, even if it's a vaccine or whatever it is. You have to go through regulatory processes. So, the next question that a lot of people ask is that, some of the drugs we use in Ghana are imported. So what really goes into ensuring that these drugs are safe for Ghanaians or even any country thereof? When you import these medicines, what really goes into the approval process for that?
Yeah, I think that is also a very good question, Eddie. You see, so as I explained, you can understand that now you go through a rigorous process to bring a new drug into the market. So once that new drug is on the market, the one who produced the drug, who discovered and who developed and has the marketing authorization, has all the information. They have all the information they need, to market and then use the drug in the clinic. So basically, you have the information about the safety, the efficacy, and all those things. Now, because they invested in developing the drug, they have to recoup some of the expenses and make some profit. So they have a patent
Right.
on it.
Okay.
So the patent holders are what you call the innovator product. They are what they call the innovator guys.
Right.
All right. So we have the innovator product. They hold the patent.
Correct.
And then after a period of time, say 20 years, the patent is expired. And then you have people now developing the drugs, making different formulations. And that we have what is called a generic drug. So we have the innovator drugs and we have the generic drugs.
Correct.
Now, for the FDA in Ghana, most of the things that are done are related to generic products. Of course, there are some aspects with the innovator drugs, but majority of the cases you see that you are dealing with the generic drugs. Now, for generic drugs, before they are actually approved on the market, they submit application. The Food and Drugs Authority makes sure they check all the documents, they take samples, they check and verify, and then sometimes, or even most of the times, they visit the facility to ensure, they inspect the facilities where the drug is being imported from to ensure whether they are complying with the CGMPs. So that is what they do. They make sure drugs are really registered, they are approved based on the standards that are approved internationally.
All right. So do they send a team of experts to these companies to make sure that they're actually following the regulations?
Yes. Okay. For that one, I can say, they do. It's one of the things that are done. One of the things that is done, making sure those facilities are inspected, they comply with the current GMP standards. So that's something that is done often.
Okay. Do we do the same kind of process for herbal medicines? Because Ghana, we heavily rely on herbal medicines and things like that. What process goes into approving of these sort of medications?
Oh, good. So I think that's a fair question. And I think the general population should be aware that people always say that, herbal medicine is safe for herbal medicine. You see, drugs are registered actually based on indications. All right. The development of drugs are based on indications. So for instance, if you say this drug is good for, say, diabetes, you go through the registration process based on that indication. But then if you add another indication, it is good for the treatment of gonorrhea or syphilis, then you change the equation. You have to now provide additional evidence to show that, yes, this same drug that treats diabetes can indeed treat gonorrhea and syphilis. The problem with herbal medicine is that people make claims without scientific basis. And that is what the Food and Drugs Board Authority actually help to prevent by ensuring that all these products are also subjected to the rules of safety, or to the guidelines of safety, to the guidelines of efficacy, and to the guidelines of quality. But I think there is a challenge there which all of us should come together to address, because there is nothing like a safe drug. If it can change a biological system, then it is not safe. It is only the dose that can tell you that it is safe or not. Yeah.
Great. It is only the dose that can tell you whether it's safe or not. You heard it from an expert who worked with the Ghana Food and Drugs Authority, saying that it's not just because people say herbal medicines are safe because they're natural, but then actually they can change biological systems and therefore has the potential to cause toxicity. So we should all be aware of that. Now, that begs the next question about, counterfeit medications. A lot of the time people in Ghana, buy, either innovators brand or generic medicine, and there's been some, reports years back that, alluded to the fact that these medicines were actually counterfeit and didn't have any active ingredient in them. How is the FDA been working towards, making sure that medications that are on the market are actually potent, they can do what they claim to do, and things like that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. As I said, the drug development process involves a lot. It entails a lot. And then during these processes, studies are performed, experiments are performed. For herbal medicines especially, let me talk about herbal medicines first, and I will talk about other drugs. For herbal medicines especially, most of the evidence is based on what we know from the community. All right, unless you are trying to make some outrageous claims about it, then you have to be subjected to a more stringent guideline. However, for generic products, once the product is approved for use, whether by Food and Drugs Administration in the US, EMA, or even by the Japanese or by the UK MHRA, you have this data available, publications available. So you can gather this information and then be submitted to the Food and Drugs Authority. All right.
Right.
This will be submitted to them, and then they will keep this information after they have done their own review, and then they have done their own checks.
Right.
Now, after that, things can change. All right. Things can change for two reasons. One, because these companies are producing, the Food and Drugs Authority is not there 24/7.
Right.
So what they do is that they have the post-marketing surveillance activities.
Okay.
Where they go on the market from time to time to check. So we have to help them because they can't be everywhere. All right.
Right.
How do we help them? By reporting some of these things. If you took maybe acetaminophen or paracetamol, and you were expected to see an effect at a particular dose,
right,
but did not see or experience that effect, you have to report it to the pharmacy where you bought it, or you have to report it to the Food and Drugs Authority. So that's one way of helping the Food and Drugs Authority deal with counterfeit products by reporting. Secondly, if you see something elsewhere, maybe you saw somebody selling medicines on a bus or selling medicines in a market other than the pharmacy or the chemical shop, you have to report it to the Food and Drugs Authority.
Right.
So by so doing, we are helping them to investigate and then check the sources of these counterfeit products. Because most of those products, I can tell you, are counterfeit.
Right.
So that is how I think we can help.
Okay. So before, I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean, at a point there was like coatem issue, and one thing that I remember happened was people could actually test the batch number or something and to a certain code, and it will give them whether the medicine they bought is actually authentic, like is real. Is there anything like this that is the Food and Drugs Board is looking at currently to make sure that people can verify the authenticity of these medicines they buy on the market?
All right. So for now, I cannot speak to what the Food and Drugs Authority is doing currently, because I mean, now all the views I'm expressing here are entirely my views and do not represent the views of my previous employers or the views of my current employers. But these are technologies that are currently available. So you can now buy any product. You can buy any product and check whether the product is from the right source or not. You can buy your HP laptop and then you can register with the company and the company can tell you, no, we don't know this product. You can buy a toner. The same thing also can be done with drugs. And so we have the batch numbers. We have different ways of detecting fake medicine. So these are all technologies available.
All right.
I think some of them have been used in Ghana. And I think in the coming years, you even see more of these technologies available for checking counterfeits. Yeah.
Great. So I'd like to bring in my co-host, Kwame, to tell us a little bit about or put his contribution for herbal medicines. So Kwame, what did you want to add? Yes. You're on mute, Kwame.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
so I'm sure you're aware of, when COVID started, so many herbal medicines at home claiming to be cures.
Yeah.
And there is one, I don't really want to mention the name, but there was one particular one that went through a whole lot of issues, said it was supposed to be an immune booster that was curing COVID. And there was another video where Edward actually and another colleague who was also a health professional tried to debunk when they tried to talk about so many other things. I just want you to talk about the veracity of some of these claims, especially pertaining to COVID, herbal medicines and COVID. Is there anything that shows that we have any that have been approved for a treatment of COVID?
Yeah, I think that's really a great question. You see, now the world has become a global village. If anybody discovers a herbal medicine that can treat COVID, the person will be not a millionaire, a billionaire, all right, and not in Ghana cities, but in dollars. And so we shouldn't be so naive, all right. You can claim that your drug can do anything in this world,
Right.
all right, but you have to prove it scientifically.
Correct.
Not by saying that, oh, this person had COVID and then he took my medicine, was cured. We need proof. All right. And that is why science comes in. Science is not anything outrageous or anything mystical. It is just a systematic study, all right, of a situation or systematic observation of a condition. So you just come together. I have 20 COVID patients. All right. You study their baseline characteristics. Then you have your well-formulated COVID herbal medicine. You administer it to them over a period of time. And then you monitor them and compare their current situation to the baseline situation. And then you can decide, oh, my herbal medicine actually can treat COVID. And so as far as I know, there is no herbal medicine that can treat COVID. And if there is something like that, I think that person should now be, should be in the news everywhere, in ABC, CNN. And so we should all keep our eyes focused, opened, wide opened, very watchful, especially for some of these claims, and not fall prey to people's deception.
Yes. And so there's one interesting thing I want to point out. Drugs that have actually been well vetted, taken through the clinical trial process, people are shying away from those.
Yeah.
But they are rather happy, or we've been made to believe that the ones that haven't been tested are already safe, and they are willing to, take those. And I don't want to mention the name of that particular product but I've had so many people who have gone for it. I know somebody who told me he bought boxes, and I'm like, why? And they're like, well, even if it doesn't, I'm just not going to risk it. And I'm like, you are indeed risking it because you do not know of the potential side effects that are associated with that particular herbal medication that you have.
Correct. Yes.
So yeah, this is an interesting discussion. And Enoch, I hope you'll be happy to come back for a more detailed discussion on herbal medicines, because back home we
heavily rely on them.
Yes. So Enoch, you are assuring us you come back for a more detailed discussion on herbal medicines, right?
Yeah, God willing, we will make time for that. And I think one thing we have to all bear in mind is the fact that drugs are not your friends, all right? And you shouldn't allow people to use anything on you. Of course, you can take a drug and experience some positive effect, but then the long-term damage, you do not know. That is why I emphasize the two main things with drug development and regulation: safety and efficacy. You may have some positive effects, it is efficacious, but what about the damage? Do you have some acute damage or chronic damage? If it is acute damage, you will see it there and then, but the chronic damage you may not see. After a long period of time, your liver is gone, your kidney is gone. All right, so we should be quite vigilant. Yeah.
All right. So we should be quite vigilant, as Kobina just mentioned. Thank you very much. And we have Janet watching us. She says drugs are not your friend. Spot on. So keep your comments coming, but we're about to wrap this section up as well. Today we've been privileged to have a lot of, scientists and professionals to help us discuss very, very important topics, which include COVID-19 all the way to how drugs are approved. So, Kobina, before we wrap up, do you have any last words for our audience?
Yeah, I think, you see, we have to get serious with a lot of things as people. What I mean by serious is that this is about our health. Drugs are about our health. It is not about the clothes you wear. It is not about your shoe, not even your car, but things you take in that affect your body, your health. And so we should take drugs seriously. And so I think for us to help the regulatory bodies, to help ourselves, especially the regulatory bodies should ensure transparency in the things they do. And if there is no transparency, if there is no flow of information, you leave a gap for conspiracy theories. And so I will not be in a haste to condemn what people term as conspiracy theories, but I will look at the gap. What information gap is there?
Right.
And if there is an information gap, can we fill that gap?
Right.
So there must be a flow of information from the regulatory body to the public about the processes, their registration. Can we tell what products are registered from what products are not registered? Is it easy for us to access that information? Is it easy for us to report something to them? So transparency is one thing. Then the second thing is avoiding conflict of interest. All right. Conflict of interest is something sometimes some of us may not take it seriously, but you cannot be a regulator and at the same time be a consultant for a certain organization. Whatever you do for one company, you must do it across board. So avoiding, conflict of interest. I think this is very key. And then the last point, as far as the regulatory side is concerned, is in trying to improve the legal infrastructure to support prosecutions related to the drugs. Because you can get somebody arrested or something, but if the due process of law is not followed, the person will get out and repeat the same mistakes and do the same things again. So these are my last words. Let us report anything we find that is unusual. People selling drugs on buses, selling drugs in polythene bags. Report it to the Food and Drugs Authority. And you yourself, listening to me, do not buy drugs from unapproved sources. Do not buy drugs from unapproved sources. Always buy drugs from a pharmacy or a chemical shop, so that if there is a problem, you can go back and say, I bought this medicine from this pharmacy. This is what I have for viewers today. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you very much. That's spot on, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for today's section. It's been a long broadcast. I would say we had a lot of great discussion. We have Lawrence, I should say Lowerta. I said absolutely. She joined us by YouTube. We also have Vanessa saying, thank you guys for the wonderful job you're doing. She joined us by YouTube as well. We had Magdalene also said, thank you very much for the education. We have Asantua the passes. I agree with you, Kwame, 100%. There was a question that came in from Nana Kofi, who is my brother. He says, why is the COVID test so expensive? I think we're going to answer this question probably next week and find out exactly why it is almost $150 for people. On the same YouTube channel, we have Loretta. She says, I think it is easy for people to believe nonsense from politicians than critical analysts. People who really delve into the facts. She goes on to say it's sad. The same person says, you know what, it's time to bring data and science back into COVID-19 response. And I believe this is going to help us a lot. And lastly, but not the least, we have Jeanette says that drugs are not your friend. She's just repeating exactly what Kobina mentioned earlier on. So this is what time will allow us today. Next week, you're going to be on here with another Power Pack edition for the HIA TV health information section. And we would like to update everybody on that on our webpage. Please go to our YouTube channel and subscribe as well, so that we can get a lot of followers and get all the information. You will not miss any of the information that we'll be putting out there. We were privileged to have Nee. We had Nana Kofi on here. We had Thelma. We had Kobina, who gave us very insightful information about drugs and how they are approved. So until we meet next week, I would like to say thank you. I'll bring in my co-host, Daniel, to join us in thanking everyone that has been supporting us. Kwame, take it away. You're on mute, Kwame.
We had a wonderful session. Like Edward said, it was really power packed. Nana Kofi, Nee, Thelma, Kwame Sapong, and Kobna. Not Kobna. It's been a wonderful session. It went a bit longer than we're looking at, but it's a lot of information. Next week we have the same packed session very information rich. And like Edward has been always saying, share our feed, like it, tell your friends about this program, and we'll continue bringing you the right information about your health. So yeah, thank you very much. Edward.
Thank you very much for that. And we will end the show right about now. See you next week.
The bad news is that everyone is a potential victim. But the good news is that everyone is a potential solution. Sensitize the masses to sanitize. Keep a social distance and quarantine. Stop!
The coronavirus is sweeping over mankind.
Everybody must be alert. It's a global pandemic we can never take for granted. Kila mtu must be alert. It's a matter of life we can never take for granted. Discipline and personal hygiene, and make sure you regularly wash your hands. Keep a distance from everyone. Report anything like a symptom. Serious fever is a symptom. Dry cough is a symptom. Walk with tamula is a symptom.